you've had so many incredible mentors. Do you
Mhm.
have any words of advice that they have given you that have just stuck with you all these years that you haven't been able to forget?
So they're so supportive. Anytime I have any questions, I'm very comfortable calling Ruth or Myas, and I guess it's something I tell my students. Like, if you really want it, go for it. Whatever. It's all possible. But if it's your passion and you really want to follow it, just go for it. And I don't think that you have to move to LA like I had to do, because the funny thing about that is when I came to LA, Benjamin Buttons ended up shooting on my grandmother's doorstep, so it would have found me. This part of storytelling would have found me somehow. I just happened to make it happen. But I always say, reach out to your film commissions. Every state has them. Every major city has them. Sometimes there's two, for the city and for the state. Find out what's going on in your city, in your state, and there's always something going on. So you get a job as an intern or a PA, or whatever you want to do, but that's your first step. Make sure you kind of, and I'm working my way up from an unpaid intern to a costume designer, and I kind of go back and forth as an assistant designer and a costume designer, because the story is really important to me. So
Mhm.
my friends and mentors get offered a better story than I was offered, and if they invite me to do it with them, I'm down.
That, that's great advice. This episode, Lawak, is nominated for an Emmy, and I like the images from it are really stunning. And so for you though, what makes this particular episode stick out as being Emmy nominated?
Well, I think there was a few that could have actually done the magic, but this one I think is really the origin story, really going back and seeing, the origin story of the Choctaw. And, the costumes were historically correct. And we made sure that we, use natural materials and all of it, just as they would have done. A lot of things, although we did use some 3D printing. Oh, and that is a technology that I use today, 3D printing.
That's
We did do some 3D printing, to do things that were, supposed to be made of bone and things of that sort. We took those liberties, but everything else was just done, just like our historians had taught us. And for that scene, it was more than just the Choctaw Cultural Center that was advising. We had historians from the Mohawk and the Cherokee and the Pacific Northwest. I had Thomas Deere and JP Johnson, Carmen Thompson. They were all helping. I would do a sketch and have some images that I found from museums, and I would meet with them and said, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm thinking of designing this costume. And they would tell me that wouldn't have been there, and this would have been, like a turkey feather, or this would have been a quill or something of that sort. So I took their information after I met them, and I went back at it and I fixed everything. And then I'd meet again and they would be like, wow, that's exactly right. So I did that with all of the tribes. And as it was executed, it just looked that amazing. And, and when there's the dignitaries that are on the stands watching the stickball game, the three in the middle were the Choctaw dignitaries. And those I kind of just pretty much right from the museum, the Choctaw Cultural Center, they were figures of history that I just kind of took that information and applied it
Yeah,
to our dignitaries. And
that's
so, following history, sometimes you go against history, but in this particular story, it needed to be historically correct.
yeah. Today's guest, Stacy Caballero, comes from design and merchandising at LSU. She worked in the costume department for the films Man of Steel, Star Trek, Harriet, and West Side Story, and as a costume design assistant on Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and she is the costume designer for the Marvel streaming series Echo, of which Stacy is nominated for Outstanding Fantasy Sci-Fi Costumes for her work on episode 2, Lawak. Okay. Now, outstanding fantasy sci-fi costumes, that could be possibly my favorite genre. So I'm so excited to welcome to the show Stacy Caballero. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
What a cool nomination to have, especially in this
Yeah.
particular field. So, we're going to definitely dive into that and what all that means for you and to you. But first, I would like to hear, what did your parents or your guardians do for a living when you were growing up? And what were you like as a kid?
I saw that question and I thought it was so interesting. Like, I really want to know what was the most interesting answer you've heard yet. For myself,
Here's good stuff. Yeah.
my parents weren't in the entertainment industry, but they're very supportive. My dad has passed since, but rest in peace, Wade. But he was a mortician. He owned funeral homes. I grew up on Bayou Lafourche in Louisiana, outside of New Orleans, and he was a mortician. He owned Caballero Funeral Home. And my mother was a florist who, after raising 9 kids, went back to school to get her degree in psychology.
Oh,
So my
wow.
mom and I were in college at the same time, basically.
Oh, how cool, but not at the same college.
Yes, we were at the same college. We were at LSU, and I would be the one like screaming, "Hey, mom!" And she would be the one embarrassed, like, "I gotta get to class."
Well, that's awesome. I love that you guys were at school at the same time. Did you have any classes
She
together?
was in a class with Shaquille O'Neal, and they were like study mates.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, now I've got to figure out how to have her on the show. That's just fascinating.
She would love it.
That's awesome. Okay, and your dad was a mortician. Do you know what? I don't think you're the first person to say that your dad was a mortician. I think that's been answered by somebody
It
else.
was a very like 6 feet under kind of a situation.
That's really fascinating. And what's interesting is they both, I can see some correlation between both of those and what you do. Like the dressing of a person, the psychology of costume. So how did you then, so you were at LSU and you were in the design and merchandising.
Merchandising, yeah. So, I guess I was just going to college, you're a freshman. I was 17 when I graduated. Like, I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I actually started as an accounting major and I took a fashion merchandising class, a fashion design class as an elective. And then I fell in love with fashion design. But I kind of always like, dyed my own clothes, made my own clothes. I always, looked at fashion magazines and copied that the best I could do. My Lebanese grandparents, my mom's grandparents owned a department store in the little small town that we grew up in on the bayou. So I had access to clothing and things. And, so I was always kind of, taking things and doing my, making it my own style, to wear out, to go to concerts or, anything, dances, whatever it was.
That
So
is,
I had a lot of fashion early on. So when I took this class, I saw this whole other world that was possibly accessible to me. So I kind of switched my major to fashion design and merchandising. And I did visiting students to FIT. And it was in my last year, my fourth year, I came back to LSU to finish my degree and I took a costume design elective in the theater department. And that's when I found the love of costume design because it was everything I love to do in one. It was, the history and the clothes and storytelling, which was
yeah.
a part of what I love doing.
So at that point, so it sounds like it kind of moved from you going like, okay, here's a hobby, here's something I like to do, to in school going, oh my gosh, you can do this. Okay, I want to do this. So then what was your next step after thinking, I want to do this? So I know that means you changed your major, but then upon graduation, what were you kind of like thinking or where were you looking? What
I was
moved?
right. I think at that time I was thinking I was going to move to New York and pursue fashion design. Of course, having to work my way up like everybody. But the pivot was I found this other world of design that I felt like just expressed everything that I love to do. And I consider myself a storyteller. So I was helping tell stories
Yeah,
through theater.
yeah.
So, and then I wanted to learn more. So I was looking for a graduate school program to go to. And so there's something called URTA. It's like University Tech Regional
Oh,
Associate. Do you
I
know?
totally know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So URTA was in New York. And so I took a train to New York and I had my portfolio and I stayed at a friend's house and I left my portfolio there and, there's sign up sheets. And I remember, they say go away for like 20 minutes and then you have to come back to see who wants to meet with you. And I was nervous. I was like, oh, if I get one or two, I'm doing really well. And then I came back and I had a whole day full of signups. And I was so excited. I remember going down to the payphone, because this was in the mid-90s, going down to the payphone and calling my parents to say, I got interviews all day long. I was just so excited.
Wow. Okay, so then from there, talk to me about how you then, I mean, the people that you have worked with is your mentors, Ruth E. Carter. I'm guessing Paul Tazwell.
Oh, yes. Paul is a good friend and mentor.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
love.
he's been on the show. Lovely. Oh my God, he is so generous. Like just in even his interviews, just how generous he is. So you've had incredible mentors. Where did that first step happen? Like, so you're, thing, but then
So
like,
I did go to grad school. I ended up going to
uh-huh.
grad school in Chicago, DePaul University, the theater school, which was formerly the Goodman School of Drama in Chicago in Lincoln Park. So I started there, and it was a 3-year program. And while I was in school, I was designing at Steppenwolf, like their kids
Yeah.
series and second stage. And I met costume designer Erin Quigley, she was doing some series in LA. She was doing Roseanne and Jeff Foxworthy. And, I think she was in part of the ensemble of Steppenwolf. Laurie Metcalf was there, and she's worked with Laurie. And so I met her and I was talking to her, and she said, oh, you should come to LA. And she offered me an internship. I had to do, as part of my curriculum, was to do an internship. I assumed I was going to be doing it in theater somewhere, New York, or, I just thought I was going to take that path until I met Erin. So then I came to LA for an internship, and I was here 3 months, and I was sleeping on my friend's sofa in North Hollywood, and I just made it happen. And I bought my plane ticket and my rental car on the last credit I had on my credit card. Like, it was nothing, as a poor student. So I came and I worked with her, and she just opened up this whole world of, television to me. And she took me shopping, she showed me the stores, and then she actually let me go out shopping for characters and help with fittings and see what set's about. So she really opened up this world for me. And she even said, you don't have to go back to Chicago, just stay here. Like, you could just keep going. And I said, I'm 3 months away from getting a master's degree. I'm going to go back to Chicago and get my degree, but I'm coming right back. And that's exactly what I did.
Wow. What an incredible story to go, okay, you can start out with nothing, and just be determined to be
Absolutely.
a hard worker. I have a quick question though. Did you happen to know Alexandra Billings from Steppenwolf?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't place
Okay,
it. Was she
that's
in
fine.
production?
Acting. I'm in the acting. Sorry, yeah.
No, I do know who you're talking about. Absolutely. She
You
was
do?
in something called the New Play series, and she was one of my actresses. She's amazingly talented.
She is. She and I were in grad school together. And yeah, she's sweet.
Great voice.
Yeah. Yeah, she does. She does. So I just had to see it. So then you did do what you said. You're kind of like Luke Skywalker, and you're like, "It's okay, Yoda. I'm coming back. I just got to go
Yeah,
take care of some things, so
come
I'm
back.
coming back to finish my training." So you come back, and you're in LA. And then what was one of your first big projects that you were like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot."
Well, that's an interesting thing, because we have unions, right? We have unions
Yeah.
that we have to deal with and be a part of in order to work in certain areas of business. So, I wasn't in a union. So I just come and I'm trying to figure out, how do I get in the union? What are the steps to take? I make the phone calls, I make the visits, and I get all the information. So I start looking at Backstage West, how can I help somebody shop or whatever they need, how can I be an assistant or an intern. So I was always applying to things off of Backstage West. And then I had a friend who was working on The Young and the Restless at CBS Radford, Nicole Stroud. And you don't have to be, there's a different union, it's called Live TV. And to get into that union, you just have to work 30 days in that union, and then you're a part of that Live TV union. And you can, at the time, it was called daytime TV. I think now it's just called streaming TV, but it was daytime TV. So I did that. So they were in a rut one day, they needed somebody, and she's like, oh, I have a friend who's like really wants to work. So that's all it took, the recommendation. And then I got the job, and then they loved what I was doing. So they asked me back, and I just started like day playing with them. And the assistant designer on The Young and the Restless, Jennifer Johns, was designing it at the time. She was going on maternity leave and they needed somebody to fill in. So she asked me to lunch, and she kind of told me what it was about, but she wanted to have lunch to discuss it more. And I brought my portfolio and we sit and had lunch, even though we knew each other before. I was an interview, and this is what you're getting if you're hiring me as your assistant designer. And I got the job. So my very first job was working on Young and the Restless at CBS Radford. No, CBS Television City, Beverly.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. That's incredible. So, we'll table talking
No,
soap operas because I'm very intrigued about soap operas and wardrobe, because it's like, okay, you're going to be in this dress for 7 months. So,
well, we were shooting like episode a day. So I can't believe they do so much in one day, but it was a very grueling schedule, an episode a day.
wow. But they wear the same look because like for a whole season, it's like the same 24 hours or something, right?
That didn't happen to us,
Oh, it
but
didn't. Okay. Okay.
if that's happening today, kudos to them. But
Yeah.
we had warehouses with rails of costumes. Like,
Oh, wow.
every character had like two long rails. Yeah, so we were constantly shopping and giving them fresh looks and keeping up with, the trends and the character and, everything needed to tell that story.
Yeah. Okay. So then how did you get attached to the Echo series?
Oh, well, I had worked in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for a little while. I had done Thor Ragnarok with Maya Surveo. And then we had done many movies before that. She had just called me one day and she's like, oh, I have our next project. It's with Marvel, Thor. And we were excited to go and, see what that world was about. And then I also worked with Ruth Carter. We did a few projects together. She was doing like the first series of Yellowstone, and they have broke for winter. They have really bad weather, and she had started Dolomite. So she needed a designer to go and help her design the last 2 episodes of the first season of Yellowstone. So she called me. I happened to be in Hawaii on another project, and I was like, okay, I'm just finishing up so I can be back in LA in a week and a half. And that's what happened. I came back to LA and I helped Ruth with Yellowstone, and we went to Utah and Montana. And so that started our working together. And then the next time we worked together was Coming to America. And then after that, I think I can't remember how we lost track of each other, but we got back together on Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever.
What that speaks to for me, what I hear is that people really enjoy working with you, and that Ruth Carter valued your work ethic, your personality, you as a person, to maintain continuing to like come along for the ride. And
I feel the same about her.
So what was that call like when you were offered the Echo series?
Well, that was interesting because I was on, we were on Wakanda Forever. It was such a long time. It was like a year and 8 months that we were on it. And then I had just finished. I think this was now like October-ish. And I was planning on taking a little bit of time off. And I got a call from Juliana Mikowski. She was working on Guardians 3. And she just needed some help. She was a few weeks away from shooting. So she just needed some help with some made to order stuff. So I jumped back in it to help her. And my thought was, I'm just going to do this for a few weeks, and then Christmas is around the corner and I'll take some time off. But I got offered to interview for Echo. So they sent me the pilot script, and I of course did a presentation, and they loosely told me a little bit about what the series was going to be. There was going to be a super suit in the end, and so I had broad strokes about it, but I had the script, which is really all I needed to help tell a story, or to put some boards together to express my thoughts on the costumes for the story. So I put a presentation together, and then I had a Zoom meeting, and I was at the Marvel warehouse working. So I actually used my old office to like set up for the Zoom, and it was Sydney Freeland was on the Zoom, and I think like 5 or 6 like Marvel producers, our executive producer Jason. So I'm, presenting my presentation, to them. Yeah. And then I remember, I wasn't told this till later, but Sydney was like, we kind of really got each other right from the beginning. I think we were on the same page about what we wanted the story to be and how we wanted to tell it. And she had texts and say, hire her now. And they're
Oh,
like, I said, okay, well, just wait a sec. And just a couple hours later, I got the phone call that they offered the job to me.
wow. The kind of, I'll just kind of do a little synopsis for our listeners too. It's set after the events of Hawkeye. It
Yes.
follows Maya Lopez from the streets of New York City back to her hometown of Tomahawk, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And she's so it's the graphic novel is rated M for mature, and definitely the series follows in suit with that with tonally and the like kind of the way to take down, she searches for the way to take down Kingpin, powerful crime ring, his crime
Mhm.
ring, and kind of remake her own image. But within that, her journey and her character
Yeah.
arc, facing her past, her American roots, embracing what that means for her and her family. And so that obviously would take you to Oklahoma to do some research. So talk to us a little bit about that, what that was like for you.
Yeah, well, that was a beautiful way of saying it, for summing it up. So, of course, research is so important in storytelling. And, something that I always think about and say is, this story, it wasn't just a Marvel story. It wasn't just a family story about love, loss, trust. It was really a love letter to the Choctaw community. It
Yeah.
was so beautifully, I had been away from it for some time and many projects in between that and now. So watching it again, I was like, it's really well done. And I think it's a really beautiful story, especially her journey with her family and her ancestors. So we did go to, there's the Choctaw Cultural Center in Durant, Oklahoma. It's such a beautiful building, museum. It's really well done. We spent some time there. I toured the museum for like 3 days. We had access to, the staff that work there were amazing with information. Seth Fairchild, Dr.
Mhm.
Ian, Stacy, Teresa. Um, they were all so accommodating to any questions that we had and really showing us around, taking us to lunch. We got to go to a powwow. I couldn't, I was like, my eyes were just popping out of my head. The powwow was so beautiful, and asking people if I could take their pictures, which everybody was so great about. So there's accents. Sydney mentioned, she's like, I could draw a direct line from the powwow to Maya's final fight costume. Because every time I would do any kind of presentations in VizDev, in the visual development meetings, I would meet with Sydney beforehand and we would review things. So, there were so many beautiful elements we wanted to include in the costumes that were
Mhm.
Choctaw based and things that we saw at the museum itself.
Yeah.
Um, so it was so important that we told the story right. So they were the Choctaw, and we watched a stickball game. So that was, very interesting to just, take in all of that culture. And anytime I had any questions, I would email, Stacy or Dr. Ian. And something that was important to me is, any insignia on any of the costumes throughout the series, not just Maya's final ceremonial vest and her fight costume. Anything was so important that it meant something. It was meaningful to the story and to the character and to the family. So they approved every insignia, every graphic that I put anywhere, especially the final fight costume.
Wow. That's a lot of work, a lot of research, and a lot of care and respect that you did through all of that. Was there any kind of unexpected pivot you had to make on the series that like you're like, oh, well, okay, yeah, we'll have to do this instead for any kind of
Um,
reason?
I think on the series as a whole, something that was very interesting to me is, of course, we're continuing from Hawkeye, so I really studied what happened on Hawkeye, and
Hmm.
because I wanted to understand the Kingpin character, which I know these characters from the comic books and other series, but where we left off, like, because I'm picking up the next day, Maya's on the run after she thinks she killed Kingpin. So to really understand what just happened to them, I watched the series. I went and saw the costumes. They were at the Marvel warehouse, so I had access to them. I was unboxing them, so I could see them. I would take pictures of them. So I really studied what was happening. And I also talked to Michael Coe, who was the designer of Hawkeye, and I just wanted to know what were some of the problems that you had. So, so I could evolve from those. I could take that information and use it to my advantage. And there was some Kingpin's muscle suit. Vincent D'Onofrio, who's an amazing Kingpin. We wanted to bring back that Kingpin from the comic books. He was this big, broad guy with these big muscles, and we wanted to bring that back. And Michael thought that they could have worked a little bit more on that muscle suit to get it to a better state. So I thought it was my turn. I was going to take it over, and I was going to figure out how we do it. And I was working with Ironhead, and we were really we had his form, we had Vincent's form made, so we can actually build on top of it. So the muscles were sculpted beautifully, and we used this really lightweight foam. And put it on a bodysuit, and it was so light, it was incredible. Like, he couldn't even believe it. And he moved in it so beautifully, especially to that scene when you see him like beating up the ice cream man, his muscles moving with his body. I was like, that's it. That's why I put all that time and attention to figuring out what is the best way to make this muscle suit and make it look real.
And what was the way?
It was that I found a lighter weight foam that we used, and instead of I built on a bodysuit, so he was just big in the muscles. I made
Did
it.
you have to carve it though and stitch it?
Okay. It was sculpted. It was sculpted and glued and stitched in between two layers of, spandex. So it was really thoughtful. It was, correct to the anatomy, and it was just really well done. The fact that it was so light and breathable was the most extraordinary thing, because wearing those could be quite hot.
So considering this series and your body of work, you have been around a lot of different ways to do costumes. Is there something that you utilize now, a technique, a piece of machinery, or something that you utilize now in your shop that you're like, wow, 5, 10 years ago, this wasn't even an option, but now?
Great. I mean, I think we have the best of it all right now. iPhones, when I first started in 1999, I had a pager. I'd had to stop at a cell phone. So just technology has come so far, and just I make sure I stay on the top of technology as far as all the applications go. AI, knowing what AI and how to use it, in the right ways. I really stay on top of that, and any kind of, researchability. Research is so important to our process. And then understanding what you're trying to say, before you even go out, if it's something that has to be shopped, I really want to understand what I'm looking for before I just send somebody out shopping. I'll do a character board with pieces and silhouettes a color palette that I say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So, people can, go right to the stores and look for those exact pieces, because I've already thought it out as far as the character goes. So just learning from my mentors, and, just continuing what I've watched them do for so many years. And I felt, in being in the Marvel world, when I was working on Ragnarok, it was before COVID. So we were all in an office, in the conference room at Marvel on the Disney lot. And then, Wakanda Forever was, we started in July of 2020. So Zoom, became so important to us. So our visual development meetings were on Zoom at that point. And all of our meetings actually, with our concept artists or with vendors we were working with, we just did everything on Zoom.
Okay. I love asking my guests this. What is a favorite place you have been to that you suggest others visit?
Japan. I was just in Japan last summer. I was with my daughter. She was 15 at the time, but we had a great time. And Google Translate is amazing. We, of course, didn't speak Japanese. She does speak Chinese because she's learning it in school, but Google Translate helped us so much. And we felt like we could do anything with Google Translate, really. Take the trains. Maps was amazing. Maps would tell you a train to, a street to a museum. But Google Translate saved me from everything from, what I was trying to purchase at a convenience store, or to use the washing machine, because we did hotels and Airbnbs because we wanted to kind of live the life.
Yeah.
Airbnb. So just washing our clothes at stops, I'd have to use Google Translate to understand, because they have like one unit. The washer and dryer is in one unit. So you have to switch it on to dryer or on to wash. What? So, having Google Translate. So I guess what I'm saying is travel. And if you can, go to Japan.
Wow, that sounds awesome. And I love the little plug for how you can make that accessible.
It's easy, yeah. And that happened to be the country I was in at the time, but for any country, Google Translate.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I've loved having
Thank you for having me.
And you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, I would love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Voice of Costume. Check out voiceofcostume.com to learn more, see upcoming guests, and be a part of our growing community.